Welcome to West Cancer Center's Leader's Guide to Associate Termination. Outcomes. At the conclusion of this module, the learner will be able to describe the 4 preliminary steps of termination, identify the correct mechanisms to disable a terminated associate's IT access, and complete termination forms required by the Human Resource Department. Terminating employees is one of the most unpleasant aspects of a manager's job duties, but sometimes it is absolutely necessary. When terminating an employee is necessary, then it should be performed in the most ethical and professional manner possible. Following the proper protocol in conducting the termination often softens the blow to the terminated employee, protects our business from potential litigation arising from the termination, and reassures the manager that they did the right thing. If you are even considering termination of an associate, call the Human Resource Department. They are your resource to be certain that you follow all the correct steps. Termination can be complicated and messy. Let them be your guide. Termination risk analysis. The decision to terminate an employee can raise many legal issues. The following basic 4 steps are designed to help you avoid situations with termination that could likely lead to litigation. While there is no way to guarantee that an employee will not sue, using this risk analysis checklist can help alert you to potential legal issues resulting in potential litigation. Step 1. Consider current policies and documents. Review the employee handbook for policies which may limit your right to terminate, such as progressive discipline policies. Did you follow progressive discipline, i.e. written warnings, prior to termination? If so, was the process of progressive discipline well documented? Documentation of the progressive discipline is important evidence should a legal claim arise. If not, can you show a valid reason for your failure to follow your own policy? For example, an employer might terminate a violent employee without warning in order to protect other employees from harm. Step 2. Consider oral or implied contracts of employment. Will this termination breach an oral contract of employment? An oral contract may have been created if the employee was told her job was secure, or that she would always have a job if she did a good job, or some other similar guarantee of employment. An oral contract can be created by anyone in the company with authority over the employee. This means that the company may be held to a supervisor's promise to an employee of secure employment, even if the supervisor did not have the company's authorization to make such a promise. Will this termination breach an implied contract of employment? An implied contract of employment may have been created by a combination of these factors. Long-term employment. Although there is no specific number of years considered long-term, many attorneys use 5 years as a guideline. Evidence or indicators of job security for the employee, such as promotions, commendations, lack of criticism of the employee's performance, or other indicators of job security. Step 3. Consider state or federal laws protecting certain classes of employees, such as the Americans with Disabilities Act. Is the employee physically or mentally disabled? If so, were attempts made to reasonably accommodate the employee's disability? Were reasonable accommodation measures well documented? Pregnancy. Is the employee pregnant? Employees are entitled to 4 months off for pregnancy-related disabilities. Workers' compensation. Has the employee filed a workers' compensation claim? Termination of an employee who has filed a claim, intends to file a claim, or has testified in workers' compensation hearings could be considered workers' compensation discrimination. Retaliation. Has the employee reported any illegal activity of the company to a state or federal agency? Even if the company is not in fact acting illegally, the termination could still be seen as retaliation for whistleblowing. Has the employee participated in any official investigation of the employer, i.e., wage or safety violation, or testified against the employer in an unemployment insurance or other hearing? Is the termination in retaliation for the employee's exercise of protected personal rights, such as freedom of speech or political activity? Step 4. Review the employee's personnel file. Is there sufficient documentation in the file to substantiate your reasons for termination? Examples include written warnings, performance reviews, and attendance records. Is there anything in the file that might be evidence of a legal termination? For example, a supervisor may have written a warning notice to the employee that her pregnancy was causing her to be absent too often. Legal counsel should be consulted if there are any concerns. Review personnel files for other employees who have similar problems. This comparison can point out potential discrimination issues. For example, could a female employee being terminated for attendance problems show that a male employee had the same number of absences but was not terminated? The best advice that you can take is to call the Human Resource Department when it comes to termination. Their job is to help navigate you through some very difficult waters. HR should be included in the entire process, from start to finish. Time to let go? Expert tips for firing employees. Realizing that you've made a bad hire or that the candidate you had high hopes for is less than enthused with their current position is tough, especially for small businesses. Even though it may seem easier just to cross your fingers and hope it gets better, the truth is you need to take control of the situation. The best thing you can do is to have a conversation with this individual and express your concerns. Give them the opportunity to realize on their own that perhaps this isn't the best fit. In some instances, after just that conversation, the employee may quit on their own. Practice what you plan to say to the employee and have all the required documentation in order so you can make the process as smooth as possible. If you're afraid that your nerves will get in the way, jot down a few talking points. At minimum, you'll need to explain the process to the employee about leaving the building, returning company-owned items, how long benefits will continue, and etc. Plan the date, time, and place. I prefer early in the week and never on a Friday. Maybe during lunch or at another time when business impacts are minimized. Conference rooms are good places. Make sure you have at least 15 minutes before the meeting to relax and get clear about your objective. When terminating an employee, you need to focus on specific facts and, again, not attack the employee as a person. Document, document, document. Without proper documentation of company rules, position requirements, and expectations, infractions, and disciplinary policies, you will lose most lawsuits. Do not fire an employee alone. As stated above, a firing is an emotional and sensitive situation, and so you will never know how someone will react. It would be wise to have an HR representative present during the meeting. A termination should never come as a surprise to an employee. The employee should have been receiving constant and real-time feedback from management all along. When an employee is taken off guard and doesn't know or expect that the termination is imminent, lawsuits arise. Be sure your decision to fire is consistent with your past behavior and practices. Firing Bob today for being late for work 3 times while you did not fire Carol for the same behavior is a red flag. Also remember to keep it short and don't make up excuses. And remember, firing is an emotional and sensitive situation. Now let us discuss the proper format to disable an associate's IT access at West Cancer Center. In an ideal world, people leave only under friendly circumstances. But it's too bad that we don't live in an ideal world. A single bad associate termination can wreak untold chaos, destruction, and financial loss, particularly when the employee has access to corporate data. The offboarding process is managed by the Human Resources Department. Always contact this department when you think an associate termination might be a possibility. PathForward IT services should also be notified to make sure that the terminated associate is not a walking and talking security breach. According to a recent survey, more than 13% of respondents still can access a previous employer's systems using their old credentials for 1 year after termination. This problem opens the company to many legal and security issues. It's always a good idea to let PathForward IT know what's going on with the termination. Prompt notification of the termination to the ID department, even a heads up in advance of the termination meeting, is appreciated so IT can bar access while the meeting is taking place. To complete the form to disable associates' IT access, go to the West Clinic intranet and use your mouse to click on Administrative Services. Now go to the Human Resources page found on the left side of the screen. Your next step is to click on Managers Only Forms. Now click on the folder labeled PathForward Forms. Now click on the West Clinic Termination Forms. I also want to call your attention to the How to Use the Account Termination Form guidelines. These guidelines provide you with a step-by-step guide to completing the form. Here's the form as it will appear. Let's look at each section more closely. Note the date of the request. Pay close attention to the effective date. If this changes after you have submitted the form, be sure to contact PathForward with the correct effective date. If the employee's last day at West Cancer Center changes for any reason after the IT form is submitted, a new form must be submitted to reflect the new date. For example, when an employee gives notice, the manager files the form, but then the manager and HR decide to release the employee from work effective immediately. A new IT form needs to be submitted because the effective date submitted originally is no longer correct. Managers must complete all fields in this section to make it completely clear who is being terminated. If you're not careful, you could be deactivating the wrong Joe Smith. Within an organization the size of West Cancer Center, many names are similar. Completing all fields helps to eliminate any confusion. Let's look at the next section, which deals with Outlook accounts. First, look at the forward email account. If you select Yes to forward the email, you must identify the West Cancer Center associate to forward the emails to and for what month duration. There are 2 email options. Be sure you carefully read both options and select the one that is most appropriate to the situation. If neither option is selected, Path Forward will default to the generic option, which is option 1. Be sure to tell Path Forward what telephone extension for the terminated employee is so that it can be removed. You will also need to deactivate the terminated associate's accounts. Please note the accounts listed are not managed by Path Forward. Therefore, when the requesting manager checks one of these boxes, the account termination request will be forwarded to the appropriate West Cancer Center associate who manages that account. Remember, it is management's responsibility to return all access and IT equipment to the respective departments in order for the responsible parties to update documentation and inventory. Now, this is the last section of this form. Remember that all termination requests require handwritten signatures as outlined below from the list of authorized approvers. But hold on, you're not done yet. There's still more paperwork that needs to be done. You still must complete the HR forms for employee termination. Go back to West Clinic Intranet home site and click on the Administrative Services. Then click on Human Resources. And now click on Managers Only Forms. Click on HR Forms. Now there are 2 forms to complete. The first form is the discharge form. The second form is the West HR Associate Termination Report. The discharge form is used to document the disciplinary reason for the termination, such as the associate name, personnel number, and date. Then you should select the performance issues that contributed to the termination. The manager should document the specific facts related to the termination. The manager should document any prior counseling or corrective action. This area is for signatures. Now, many terminated employees will refuse to sign this document. This is a good reason to have another person, such as your HR representative or another manager, in the room with you. If this occurs, be sure to write "refuses to sign" and have the second person sign the form along with the date. The second form is the Associate Termination Report. The Associate Termination Report is always used for terminations including voluntary, non-disciplinary, and involuntary. The Associate Termination Report includes more information, although may be repetitive, from the discharge form. Let's look at this form more closely. In the first section, be sure to complete this section accurately with the correct name, date, position numbers, dates of employment, last day worked, and the date of termination. If you don't know some of this information, contact Human Resources. The next section deals with the type of termination. Specifically, was it voluntary, involuntary, and do you recommend for rehire? The manager can also document further in the following text boxes. The next section seeks to get the most current address of the terminated employee. Please pay special attention to the directions given to the manager regarding company property, ID badges, etc. On this form, there is a place for the manager's signature and human resource signature. Note, there is no place for the associate signature. Please note that on the last section is for payroll purposes only and addresses outstanding balances and PTO. Remember, terminating an employee is a tough process, even for the most experienced leaders. However, your human resource professionals are here to help guide you through each step. Don't hesitate to contact them, and do it before you begin the process. With termination, always proceed cautiously.